Nearly 5 decades after a young mother was strangled and left in her car, a fingerprint on a carton of cigarettes led to an arrest. Using updated forensic technology, authorities matched the print to a 69-year-old man living in Ohio. DNA evidence later confirmed his connection to the crime, bringing long-awaited progress in a case that had haunted investigators for generations. In cold cases like this, the passage of time is often the biggest obstacle. Memories fade, witnesses pass away. Physical evidence can degrade or disappear altogether. But in Jeanette Ralston's case, one crucial detail remained preserved for nearly 50 years. A thumbprint on a carton of cigarettes. It would take advancements in forensic databases and a determined group of investigators to finally turn that print into a name. And Jeanette Ralston was 24 years old. She was a single mother living in San Mateo, California. On the night of January 31st, 1977, she went out with friends to the Lion's Den bar in San Jose. It was a typical weeknight. She told her friends she would be back shortly. Just a quick step outside with a man she had met, one she likely believed posed no danger. But she never returned. To those who knew her, Jeanette was not just a name in a case file. She was a mother, a daughter, a friend. Her 6-year-old son, Alan, was asleep at home that night, waiting for a mother who would never come back. Friends remembered her as kind, responsible, and warm. A young woman balancing motherhood with a small moment of freedom. The next morning, on February 1st, 1977, Jeanette's body was found in the back seat of her Volkswagen Beetle. The car was parked in the carport of an apartment complex near the bar. Her body had been wedged tightly into the back seat. The medical examiner concluded she had been strangled with a long-sleeved dress shirt. There was also evidence of sexual assault. The killer attempted to burn the car, likely trying to destroy evidence, but the fire failed. Even in death, Jeanette's body told a story. But at the time, investigators could only go so far with the technology they had. San Jose police launched an immediate investigation. Witnesses were interviewed. A suspect sketch was created. Friends said Jeanette left the bar shortly before midnight, telling them she would return in 10 minutes. Among the evidence collected was a carton of Eve cigarettes found inside the car. A partial fingerprint was lifted from that carton. But in the 1970s, fingerprint databases were limited. There was no match, no suspect emerged, and eventually the case went cold. Years passed. The fingerprint was tested again and again, each time yielding no results. Leads dried up. Witnesses aged. The suspect vanished, likely unaware that a single fingerprint sat in an evidence locker, waiting for science to catch up. Then, in August of 2024, everything changed. Deputy District Attorney Rob Baker requested the fingerprint be tested one more time. The Federal Bureau of Investigation had recently updated its fingerprint database and search algorithms. It was a long shot. Baker later called it a Hail Mary. This time, it worked. The print matched a man named Willie Eugene Sims. And now, 69 years old and living in Jefferson, Ohio, Sims had a criminal history. In 1978, 1 year after Jeanette's murder, he was convicted in Monterey County for assault with intent to commit murder. At the time of Jeanette's death, Sims was an Army private stationed at Fort Ord, less than 70 miles from San Jose. Investigators traveled to Ohio with local authorities to collect Sims' DNA. The Santa Clara County District Attorney's Crime Lab analyzed the sample. It matched biological material recovered from the crime scene, including evidence found under Jeanette's fingernails and on the shirt used to strangle her. After nearly 5 decades, the case finally had a suspect, physical evidence, and surviving witnesses. Sims was arraigned in Ashtabula County, Ohio. He now awaits extradition to California. If convicted, he faces 25 years to life in prison. For Jeanette's son, Alan, now in his 50s, The arrest brought long overdue answers. In interviews and online posts, he expressed deep gratitude to investigators who never gave up. "You have undoubtedly made a 6-year-old kid happy after all these years," he wrote. "Thank you from the bottom of my heart." For prosecutors and detectives, the case represented more than a single arrest. Since launching the cold case unit in 2011, the Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office has solved more than 30 murders dating back to 1969. More than half of those cases were solved in just the past 5 years. District Attorney Jeff Rosen summarized it simply: "Cases may grow old and be forgotten by the public. We do not forget, and we do not give up." In the end, Jeanette Ralston's story remains a tragedy, but it is no longer without accountability, because one fingerprint was preserved. One mother's memory now has justice, and a little boy who once waited for his mom to come home, now a grown man, finally has answers. After 34 years, a break in a brutal cold case finally came. Not from a confession, not from a new witness, and not from a sudden lead, but from DNA. In November of 2024, authorities announced they had identified the man responsible for the 1990 sexual assault and murder of 32-year-old Maria Weidhofer in Berkeley, California. The suspect, John Lipari, died by suicide just days before police could confront him. Maria Weidhofer was 32 years old when she was murdered. She had moved from Southern California to Berkeley in the late 1980s, hoping to pursue a quieter and more creative life. She lived in a macrobiotic collective with roommates who described her as gentle, private, and artistic. Maria worked evenings at a natural food store in Oakland. She spent her free time painting and sketching, hoping to follow in her father's footsteps as an artist. She was a vegetarian, a committed runner, and a lover of the East Bay Hills, where she often jogged alone to clear her mind. On November the 15th, 1990, Maria set out for a run on the Nimitz Trail in Tilden Regional Park. The wooded area was popular with hikers and joggers. She never returned. When Maria failed to arrive at work that evening, her roommates grew concerned and reported her missing. The next morning, they found her truck parked at the trailhead near Inspiration Point, one of her favorite running routes. A search led authorities to a redwood grove about 1 mile from where her truck was found. There, they discovered Maria's body. She was partially hidden, but not deeply concealed. Pure, she had been pulled slightly off the trail. A rope was tied around her neck. Signs of a struggle were evident. An autopsy confirmed she died from ligature strangulation. She had sustained multiple minor abrasions and contusions. She had also been sexually assaulted. At the time, the East Bay Regional Park District Police Department launched a full-scale investigation. Witnesses described a suspicious man seen in the park that day. He was described as European-looking, in his mid-20s to early 30s, slender with broad shoulders, short dark hair, and a mustache. But even with this information and an early DNA collection, no suspect was identified. In 1997, DNA samples from the crime scene were sent to the Contra Costa County Crime Lab. A male DNA profile was developed and uploaded into the National CODIS database. There was no match. Over the years, investigators continued searching. In 2017, a predictive DNA-based sketch of the suspect was released. It generated public interest, but no arrest followed. Maria's case remained unresolved, weighing heavily on the investigators who worked it. The major breakthrough came decades later. In 2020, East Bay Parks Police partnered with the Federal Bureau of Investigation to revisit cold cases using investigative genetic genealogy. By 2023, genealogical research had narrowed the suspect pool. By 2024, authorities identified John Lipari as their primary suspect. At the time of Maria's death, Lipari had been living in Martinez, California. 2 years later, he moved to Oregon and settling in the small coastal town of Gold Beach. In early November of 2024, just as authorities prepared to contact him, Lipari died by suicide at his home. According to officials, he used a firearm. There was no indication he knew he was under investigation. A family-run GoFundMe page later revealed that Lipari had been battling cancer for years. It suggested that his declining health may have contributed to his decision. Following his death, a postmortem DNA comparison confirmed the match. Semen collected from Maria's body in 1990 was directly linked to John Lipari. Investigators found no evidence that Lipari was aware of the investigation. They also found no connection between him and Maria. It appeared to be a random predatory act. Lipari had no known criminal record. So far, no evidence has linked him to any other crimes. Officials believe he may have waited near the trailhead, smoking cigarettes at a bench, choosing his victim at random. The revelation shocked Lipari's surviving family. They were informed of his connection to the case only after his death. A relative stated publicly that they had no knowledge of his past and offered condolences to Maria's family. For investigators, the announcement brought mixed emotions. For Detective Christopher Rudy, who led the investigation in recent years, the resolution was both relief and regret. When it was a match, it was definitely bittersweet, he said. I would have loved for him to know that we were closing in on him. Former detectives echoed the same feeling. Bill DeLeon Granados, who worked the case beginning in 2017 and retired in 2020, described it as an investigation that never leaves you. A case like this stays with you, he said, even after you leave the job. The resolution came through years of genealogical research, advancements in forensic science, and extensive interagency collaboration. Authorities emphasized that Maria's case was never forgotten. They were simply waiting for the right tools to catch up with the evidence. Maria's family did not attend the press conference. Instead, a statement was read on their behalf. They expressed both grief and gratitude. Maria, the family, and the world were carelessly cheated of her future, they wrote. They remembered her as a gentle soul, pursuing her dreams as an artist and baker within the Bay Area community she loved. A district attorney officials acknowledged that justice came too late to hold the suspect accountable in court, but they stressed the importance of closure. Justice may have been delayed, said Police Chief Roberto Felice, but it was not forgotten. After decades of silence, Maria Weidhofer's story now has answers. Her case stands as proof that even time cannot erase evidence, and that persistence, science, and refusal to give up can still speak for the dead. After nearly 4 decades of silence, justice may finally be within reach for the family of Jesus Ibarra. In the year 2024, a routine DNA collection from a suspect in an unrelated case led authorities to charge a Santa Clara man in the long-unsolved 1987 murder. For law enforcement, it was the latest success in a growing number of cold cases solved through advancing forensic science. For Ibarra's loved ones, it was the answer to a question they had been asking for almost 40 years. Who killed him and why? Jesus Ibarra was 46 years old when he died. He lived in a modest apartment on Nordale Avenue in San Jose. He worked as a machine and sheet metal laborer, and he kept close ties with his family. Those who knew him described him as reliable and hardworking, a quiet man who earned an honest living in his community. He was not the kind of person anyone expected to become the victim of a violent crime. In April of 1987, everything changed. Jesus failed to check in with his family, raising concern. When relatives went to his apartment, they found him dead inside. His body showed signs of a brutal assault. The Santa Clara County Medical Examiner ruled that he died from blunt force trauma to the neck. He had been strangled with a power cord. Investigators also discovered that several of his belongings were missing. Among them, a gold chain necklace, a ring, and his car. That car was discovered before his body was even found. It had been burned from the inside out and abandoned on Peach Court, a less than 3 miles from Ibarra's home. At the time, the case raised more questions than answers. No suspects were identified. Investigators believed the victim and his killer likely knew one another, but they had no concrete leads. With limited forensic tools and no witnesses, the case eventually went cold. Years passed. The murder of Jesus Ibarra remained unsolved. His name slowly joined a growing list of cold cases stored in police archives. The case was filed away, but it was never forgotten. Law enforcement periodically reviewed it as new forensic tools emerged. Still, the breakthrough would not come until the year 2024, 37 years later. That year, Joseph Anthony Abita was already in custody on unrelated charges. Those charges included weapons possession and identity theft. As part of the intake process, a DNA sample was collected and entered into CODIS, the national DNA database used by law enforcement. It was routine, but this time it produced a hit. The DNA linked Abita to evidence found at the Ibarra crime scene in 1987. With the initial match established, authorities launched a full review. They conducted confirmation testing using DNA collected during Abita's recent arrest. The results were undeniable. His DNA matched multiple pieces of evidence from the scene. It was found on Ibarra's body, on his bicep and thigh. It was also found on his shirt, a beer can, a semen-stained blanket, and the power cord believed to be the murder weapon. The scope and placement of the DNA placed Abita at the scene and directly tied him to the killing. Michael Gilman, a deputy district attorney for Santa Clara County, explained the significance. "This defendant's DNA was on that electrical cord," he said. "The cord that was tragically wrapped around the victim's neck. It was the kind of evidence cold case prosecutors hope for. A genetic trail preserved for decades, waiting for science to catch up. The investigation uncovered additional connections. County records showed that Abita was living on Peach Court just 1 month after Ibarra's murder. That was less than a block from where the burned car was found. Prosecutors believe Abita may have stolen Ibarra's jewelry and vehicle before abandoning and setting the car on fire. Abita's criminal history included prior arrests for substance abuse and robbery. But until the DNA match, he had never been linked to this homicide. Now, he faces a charge of murder. If convicted, he could serve 25 years to life in prison. Despite the strength of the evidence, progress in court has been slow. Abita refused to appear at his initial arraignment in September of 2024. His next court appearance was scheduled days later, with prosecutors hoping he would agree to attend. For Jesus Ibarra's family, the developments brought long-awaited answers. Several relatives were present at the courthouse when the charges were announced. Their presence underscored the emotional weight of the moment. Deputy District Attorney Gilman acknowledged the difficulty of prosecuting cold cases, but emphasized the determination behind the effort. "They just want justice," he said. "We are committed to delivering it." The Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office has made cold case resolutions a priority. The San Jose Police Department, which assisted in the Ibarra investigation, closed 9 cold cases that same year. It is a clear sign of how far forensic science has advanced and how committed agencies are to revisiting the past. San Jose Police Public Information Officer Stacy Shee highlighted the role DNA played in solving the case. "We were able to use modern crime lab technology," she said, "to prove the suspect was present in that apartment and responsible for the murder." For investigators, every solved cold case validates years of persistence. For families like the Ibarra family, it means truth, accountability, and long-delayed answers. After 37 years of waiting, they now know who took Jesus Ibarra's life. The road to justice was long, but today it is no longer out of reach.